Ohio State will play Indiana on Saturday, and it's time to make our predictions. Nathan, we're going to start with you. The line right now is Ohio State minus 30, with the over-under being 60. What's your prediction?
I'm going to take Ohio State 48, Indiana 13. I don't really think that this is going to be close because of what I said before. I don't think Indiana can challenge Ohio State offensively. I think this Ohio State defense is going to be better. I think it is going to be less susceptible to problems, especially in the back end and those sorts of breakdowns. I think it's going to be in a game like this, especially where now you're taking two very inexperienced quarterbacks, and we still don't know which one's going to play for IU, but either one of them now having to solve a Jim Knowles defense. That's why I think he might still be pretty aggressive in this matchup, actually. And it's not because he has to do it to win the game at large, but to win the game emphatically, to go in and create problems for these young, inexperienced quarterbacks, create some turnovers potentially, let this offense get its rhythm built that way. There's just too many ways that I see this unfolding where it starts sliding downhill pretty fast on the Hoosiers, who I actually don't have big expectations for them overall this season. And this talent gap, this kind of talent gap is one of the reasons. I just, as much as they have helped themselves with the transfer portal, I think it remains to be seen how much you can do on day one of a season to close a gap with a team like Ohio State. So I'm saying 48-13, which would cover the spread and be just a tick over the over-under.
So Nathan Baird is taking the Ohio State to cover and the over as well, 48-13. Andrew, what's your score?
Pretty similar to Nathan's. I'm going to go 41-13. So while it is pretty similar, that does mean that we are going under, and that does mean that the Hoosiers are going to cover. I think with this defense for Ohio State, I really struggle to see how Indiana is going to score, or at least score consistently. I think, you could probably drum up a scenario where, all right, they get good field position. Okay, they get a good punt return, something like that, and they get, kind of a one-off. I can't imagine them kind of marching down the field, on a couple straight drives and just kind of scoring at will on this Ohio State defense. I am curious. One of the things that, I haven't really discussed because it's more related to the over-under is, for years, what was the game plan, or at least what was the book, if you will, on beating Ohio State? It's running the ball. It's controlling the clock. I mean, you think back to the Oregon game when Oregon ran for like 275 yards or whatever that was, like the Michigan games the last few years. Like, if you want to beat Ohio State, the model, I guess, for a lot of people, whether or not, you've tried it or it's worked, has been to run the ball, to control the clock, and to keep the ball out of their hands. I think that that's going to stay the same. But what I am curious about is Ohio State has TreVeyon Henderson now, and he's back healthy. And if you run the ball more, like if, Steven was talking the other day on one of our YouTube videos, which is now up, go check that out. But he was talking about how he thinks that TreVeyon Henderson's going to have a great game. And is Ohio State willing to kind of play into their opponent's hands a little bit and just say, you know what? We're going to run the ball, and because we can do it for 6.5 yards a carry, and that's great for them, but that does burn the clock a little bit more. So I'm curious to see how they kind of handle that, because what you don't want to do if you're Ohio State is shorten the game even more than the game has already been shortened, and the game by the clock rules, and shorten the game even more than other teams are trying to shorten the game. I just think that we're going to go slightly under. You're going to lose a few plays with the clock. I don't think it's going to be that big of a difference, but it does kind of make me want to lean under on a lot of these week 1, week 0 games. I know I said the other day that unders went, I think 7-3 in week 0, according to one sports book. So I think under is going to hit. I think Ohio State's offense is going to score. I think 41 is going to be, I think 41 is going to be one of those days where you look at it and say, that was a really efficient 41. They looked crisp doing that 41. They ran the ball well. Kyle McCord looked good. Devin Brown, I think, is going to come in and look good too. I just think that, when you have that assortment of talent and against an opponent like this where, you're not playing Penn State or Notre Dame or whoever to start the season, I think you're going to get a nice performance from them. So Ohio State wins pretty comfortably in a game that is pretty much cleanup duty for most of the second half. But Indiana covers and we go under.
So Ohio State's scoring 41 points. That would be the least amount of points Ohio State has scored on Indiana since Ryan Day came to town. They scored 49 in 2017, 49 again in 2018, 51 in 2018, 51 in 2019, 42 in 2020, which is one of the only time. That's the only other time he's been under 49, and then he scored 54 in 2021 and then 56 last year. I don't think this game is going to be close anymore. I thought it would. I don't think there's a single point in this game where this game is competitive past the first 3 drives. I mean, period. Like, Ohio State has 2 offensive possessions, Indiana has 1 offensive possession, or vice versa. I just don't see it being all that close. Indiana I'm not sold there. So I did some math. I did some Steven math, which just means I added some stuff together and found a number, and then I did some other stuff to make it a different
You did
number.
some Steven math, which means I like it. Nice little play on words.
You see the vision there. So I came up with the
also
score.
an arithmetic word too.
Yeah, there it is. Look at us making all these connections.
Wordsmith over here. Once again, that's why they pay me the bucks. You see, I'm not saying
bucks.
big. I'm just saying bucks. But anyway, I went with 55 to 10.
Bucks.
Yeah, I went with 55 to 10. I think Indiana's going to have a drive maybe early in the game or maybe late in the game, but at some point they just get something because that's how this works. Even in 2019 against Florida Atlantic, when Ohio State had one of the best defenses we've seen in the past decade, Florida Atlantic moved the ball a couple of times and was able to get on the scoreboard. So I think Indiana does get on the scoreboard, but I just think Ohio State's going to move the ball. And they're going to move it with Kyle McCord out there. I think they're going to move it if Devin Brown comes out there. It's just there's a lot that Indiana has to try to deal with while also trying to figure out what it has. So I think there's a situation here where they look like what Ohio State looked like in 2021 against Minnesota, where they're throwing a bunch of guys out there trying to figure out who their best guys are still. Meanwhile, Ohio State is a fully functioning machine, even if its quarterback is brand new this year. So 55 to 10, that's taking the over, and that's Ohio State covering in this situation. It's a big cover. Minus 30 is a lot, but Ohio State's kind of had its way with Indiana ever since outside of one season, outside of that 2020 game when Michael Penix, who's now at Washington, was here. So that's 2 covers, 1 over, and those are our score predictions for Ohio State's season opener against Indiana.